I'm pleased to have with me today India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal. He's in Australia to discuss investment opportunities between our two nations. Minister Goyal, thank you very much for joining us on Indian Link. Now, you were appointed as Minister of Commerce and Industry in June 2019. The latest World Bank report has said that India remains the world's fastest growing major economy, growing at a rapid rate of 8.2% in financial year 23-24, while the manufacturing sector grew by 9.9%. There's a bit of Indian in me coming out saying, where did we lose the 0.1%? Because 10% would be wonderful. Now, is that a very good 5-year report card?
Well, I think India is hungry for more. We are never satisfied with what we achieve. We have a long way to go because there's a lot of catch-up to do. There were decades of lost opportunity that we inherited when in 2014, Prime Minister Modi became the Prime Minister. India was considered a fragile 5 economy, one of the weakest 5 in the world. So we've painstakingly over the last 10 years strengthened the macroeconomic fundamentals. We have carefully administered reform in the country, focused on transforming the mindset of the people. Today, we are not only the world's 5th largest GDP, we have low inflation, about 3.5%, 3.6%. We have a situation where we have the world's 4th largest foreign currency reserves, $689 billion. Very low external debt, so we are not at risk. The currency is stable. And amongst the large economies, the fastest growing economy for many years in a row, expected to continue to be the fastest growing for many years in the future. So we are a sweet spot, but never one to be satisfied on. Ye dil mange more.
Or milega bhi bahut more. Minister, now a recent report from Bloomberg pointed out that Apple suppliers manufactured iPhones worth about 14 billion in India during financial year 24, which was 14% of the global exports. They plan to take it up to 25% in the next 4 years, which will earn India about $25 billion. There's an enormous faith in the India story, while also a pivot away from China. Your thoughts on the Apple manufacturing story, and is the manufacturing rivalry between India and China now moving more into India's favor?
First of all, I must compliment Apple for its bold decision. Prime Minister Narendra Modi had introduced the production-linked incentive scheme, recognizing that we have competitive strengths in certain industries. We identified 14 different emerging sectors and carefully analyzed the cost competitiveness and why we were losing out on business opportunity. And I think that move turned out to be very positive for India. We are today the world's 2nd largest mobile phone manufacturer today. Over 200 factories producing phones or the ecosystem around phones, whereas we had only 2 10 years ago. And the Apple story has been truly one of those successful stories where electronics export today is our 3rd largest export, thanks to, in large measure, to the efforts of companies like Apple. We have now introduced the Semiconductor mission also, so we'll have a greater domestic value add for all the phones that Apple makes. And the big advantage in the India growth story is that we also present a huge domestic demand. 1.4 billion people is a very compelling case with the rule of law, democracy that we are very proud of. So you'll never be discriminated against. You have a reformist, decisive government, a leader who can take firm decisions. You have a very good demographic dividend, young population, skill, talent, people willing to work hard. In fact, I'm told 70 or 80% of the workers in the Apple factory are women. So all of these put together with the large demand that India provides, with the growing middle class, has encouraged Apple to expand operations in India. An emerging economy that aspires to be 10x in the next 25 years. We are about $3.5 trillion. We want to go up to 35 trillion by 2047. When we celebrate 100 years of independence. This growth opportunity has never been witnessed in humanity or in human history ever before.
Minister, now you're keen to make a strong case for India to become a Taiwan plus one semiconductor country, in which India can be a place for companies to diversify outside of Taiwan for semiconductors. In 2021, India had approved a US $10 billion incentive plan to attract semiconductor chip makers. 3 years down the track, how's that tracking?
I think it's one of the success stories of India. A large part of that money has already been committed. We had the Tatas setting up with the Taiwanese company a fab in Assam. Micron has come to Gujarat. I think Applied Materials has also decided to come in. As one company comes in, the entire ecosystem gets attracted. And the semicon industry, and I've been engaged with them for some time now, continuously tells me, don't be in a rush. This is a process. First, the design guys come in, then the AMP guys come in, you have the packaging happening. It's the ecosystem builds up over a period of time. And that's when you finally start seeing the fabs moving in a big way.
Minister, now the World Bank report card I referred to earlier pointed out that lowering the trade barriers can help India achieve its ambitious target of 1 trillion for merchandise exports by 2030. Do you feel India is doing enough in lowering trade barriers to achieve these goals, especially in the areas of the retail sector and the dairy industry?
Well, there will be some trade barriers which are necessary to protect sections of Indian industry or farmers. Dairy, for one, is an area where I have very small farms and the farm owner has 2 or 3 livestock, giving him a small quantity of milk or dairy. Now, I have to protect them because they really can't compete with those large farms with thousands of animals and stuff like that. And therefore, certain sectors deserve and will always require some trade barriers. On many sectors, we are entering into free trade agreements with different countries. We are working on reducing trade barriers as long as it is reciprocated by the countries on the other side. It can't be a unilateral action. So we are working with countries to see what we can do to further strengthen relationships and bilaterally improve the trading conditions. Of course, on a macro level also, there are many major changes being done. For example, to encourage a particular sector, very often we wanted to encourage, let's say, leather or apparel industries. So you then keep reducing the trade barriers on those sectors. It's a cat and mouse game. You are trying to save some. There are some offensive interests.
Yes.
There are some defensive interests. You have to carefully navigate the...
Right. Minister, now please allow me to use a Facebook analogy. In September 2021, when the Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement, ECTA, was agreed on, both India and Australia changed their Facebook status from friends to in a relationship. Almost 3 years down the track, this mutual status has yet to be changed to engaged by finalizing the next step of signing off on the Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement, CECA. Can you share with us as to what sort of a timeline can we expect on the CECA sign-off and what is holding it back?
I think there's a great trust and sincerity of purpose in the work that Australia and India are doing to finalize this agreement. India went into election mode and almost calendar 24. From the beginning, we were in elections, parliament, then elections. And now I have elections in my home state in Maharashtra. So it's a little bit of an election year in India this year and next year in Australia. So I think that's delayed it a little bit. There's no lack of intention. And both my good friend, brother and colleague, Don Farrell, and I are committed to concluding the final stage of the ECTA agreement at the earliest. We never put deadlines or dates or a gun on our head to negotiate because both sides have to give and take.
Quite a long time. I'm sorry, I do know that there have been election pressures and
well, first there were elections in Australia.
Yes, and now there are going to be elections next year in Australia. So is it going to be...
You have to navigate the processes within this. There are certain issues where both sides have to take a call, on MRAs, mutual recognition agreements, on the services sector. So we ultimately have to come up with fair and balanced agreements. And both sides have to give some and take some.
So do we expect it after the Australian election next year? I know you haven't given me a deadline or a timeline.
We never discuss with timelines or a gun on our head on FTAs.
Right.
It's always necessary to give elbow room.
Right.
And try to get the best deal, which is in the interest of the people and businesses of both sides.
It is clear that government-to-government engagement is very strong between India and Australia. Are you heartened by the level of corporate engagement? How has it changed since your last visit to Australia?
The relationship post-ECTA has been good. We've been seeing growing trade, increasing participation in the services sector. After that, the double taxation agreement was improvised. We could do better with tourism numbers. The common refrain in all meetings is more flights, direct flights to Australia from India. But that's an international problem. We have a shortage of aircraft right now worldwide. Tourism becoming one of the mainstays of this relationship. Technology being another very important element of this partnership. So ITTT, investment, trade, tourism and technology is going to be at the frontier of our work with Australia. And I'm hoping very soon to start an office to promote tourism, trade, investments, technology flow through Invest India, the Director General of Foreign Trade, NICDIC, a single-stop shop for industrial land or for one-stop approval of all kinds. We're trying to create a setup in one of the cities in Australia.
Sydney, I hope.
I hope it will be Sydney. The decision will be taken in consultation with the industry.
Minister, one thing you missed out or haven't said about is education. Education is a big trade between India and Australia. But recently, the government has cut down on education numbers to come here. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's something that's counterproductive from the Australia perspective, because the Indian students who come here bring in a lot of value in terms of students, as well as the value proposition they bring to the Australian economy, even in their post-student days. So I would think that... and they are very peace-loving. Indians are not a community which has ever hurt or harmed the local community in any way. But that is a sovereign decision that Australia will have to take. My own sense is the universities will hurt. Their revenues will be down. And you may actually have a shortage of manpower in the country.
Right. How is your relationship with former Prime Minister Tony Abbott?
My friendship with all the senior leaders of Australia have been phenomenal. Tony Abbott, amongst the first big leaders to come to India, is such a pleasing personality, such an easy person to get along with. His first question was, Piyush, can you get me a session of yoga with Prime Minister Modi? And I was flummoxed. I just didn't know what to say. But is a wonderful leader, tremendous human being, and full of energy, full of confidence about the Australia-India partnership, and somebody whom I've always admired for being the champion of the Australia-India friendship, partnership. After that, I've worked with both Mr. Morrison and with Mr. Albanese, both remarkable leaders of substance. I've had to work with several ministers in Australia because I've had portfolios which were very relevant to Australia: coal, mining, renewable energy, power, so all the energy, various portfolios. I can only tell you I've enjoyed working with the Australian leadership over the years. Current Minister Don Farrell is an outstanding human being and a dear friend. I'm looking forward to my visit to Adelaide day after tomorrow. We have a great future ahead between us.
My very last question. Did Prime Minister Abbott get a yoga session with Prime Minister Modi?
Kuch Raj ko Raj hi rehne do.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.